So, you know, what you were saying in terms of, you know, gender, people affiliating themselves with genders, and what is it actually to be gay? And you're saying there's just two different things. Like one is an actual mental comprehension versus, you know.
Oh yes, the LGBT community, and talking about the gender issues and sexuality issues, and how gender identity is completely different to sexuality. Being gay, lesbian, bisexual is not an identity issue. It's a sexuality thing, whereas transgender, non-binary, it's more of an identity issue. And I can speak that through my own experience of going through a transition myself.
Well, back at it. This is so cool to see you guys again, honestly. It's honestly amazing. Like, you know, I spoke to so many people from my live streams, but you guys, every time I got to your little corner and from our house, you know, it was like, hey, it was just so cool to catch up and just like, good vibes all the time, eh? I mean, that was life-changing, eh? Just being down there. I mean, obviously, during the Freedom Village, it was just like...
an amazing experience. Yeah. Absolutely life-changing.
Yeah. And so what's been after that? I mean, you know, you've seen obviously so much change in the last, what's it been like now, 6 months since that's all happened. It's changed so many lives, all of our lives. And, you know, what are some elements that you see, maybe things that are not improving, or maybe things are driving towards the other way, or people are crying out towards other, you know, groups or agendas, or maybe genders itself, or, you know, what are some elements do you think that the people are calling out that are just maybe not, you know, that you think that maybe there's a bit too far, or maybe they haven't got the right idea about?
Well, definitely, like, the division is still very much alive. It's very strong how we're not as a united front like we would hope to be. I guess having the different groups and stuff like that, and being put in a group, you kind of, I don't know, you feel like you need to stick with that instead of opening your mind to the other possibilities and just widening that perspective, because, you know, you might have the same idea after all, you know.
Yeah. And so, obviously, we were there just at the most recent protest, and was it 23rd August? Yeah, 23rd on Tuesday. FRC, Freedom Rights Coalition, organised that, but I guess, you know, as you've mentioned to me, like, it wasn't, you weren't actually there for Brian, it was more for the actual movement itself, isn't it? You're there to show and stand for what you believe in, right? And then you obviously saw the counter protesters with their little protests, and they had some interesting signs and banners and all that. And I mean, what do you have to say about that? And they obviously had you know, the gay pride as well, and that sort of thing. And as you mentioned to me, which I thought was really amazing, how people have just grouped them all in one section, and I think that's the misconception there itself, isn't it?
Yeah, well, for us, we found like we were like Switzerland, walking, because we were walking behind Brian Tamati, yet we are part of the LGBT community. So our community was on that counter protesting against Brian, and I totally understand them doing so with his own ideologies and his belief systems and stuff like that. It threatens the community. But for us, we had to put that aside because it came down to the kaupapa in the end, which was all for our freedoms and our rights. So, yeah, we did find it a little bit odd going against our own community, but we didn't really feel like we were going against them because we were fighting for the same thing. The other team was an anti-facet group, which is pretty much what the freedom of rights and all of us freedom fighters are.
Yeah.
You know, we're not for that. How I've noticed a lot of mainstream, or even I have noticed independent media, you know, calling them out as Antifa and grouping them all in that group, and it's not, they're not even all Antifa. You know, the LGBT community is a different group to Antifa. They just walked beside each other because they support the same kaupapa, you know, so we shouldn't really be grouping them together. It's like us getting grouped underneath Destiny's Church when we're clearly not Destiny Church people. But we still get that same perception from the outside world because of that one leader or that bigger voice. Yeah. And it's just really not the case. Just like that counter protest, they're not all Antifa. There is LGBT community there. There's other people, these families of LGBT community, and you know, they're all there because of their thoughts against Tamaki and his ideas with his belief systems and what, you know, he might end up taking away from them if he was to make a stance in a political sense.
Yeah, I think that you got it right on hit the nail on the head there, because a lot of people, even within the movement of, you know, say they call it the far right, and you can almost say they're far left, but it's just two wings of the same bird. And the thing is, like, as you said, like, you know, you've drawn into, you know, Tamaki's protest, but you went there and totally for Tamaki and what he believes in, that sort of thing. You have different values and that sort of thing, and you know, there are plenty of people out there that they are just on the same page, I think, and like you said, they've obviously, mainstream media puts, you know, us in a whole other view of saying, you know, like, you know, anti-vaxxers and all that sort of thing. And yeah, sure, there are anti-vaxxers in the group. That's cool, but not all of them are. No, you know, some people have had all the jabs and all that sort of thing, right? But all of a sudden, when it came to this particular one, they've just said no. You know, doctors, nurses, and that sort of thing, and you know, people have worked in all sorts of society and all sorts of realms and all different nationalities and languages and religions and all that sort of thing. And as you've said, the same thing is happening on the other side. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest misconception is there's no communication between those two. No, where is a sit down of those two people actually coming together and putting it together, right? Yeah. Yeah. We could definitely work better as a team. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think are some things that, you know, that maybe can be improved in the way of, you know, maybe trying to get towards these people and giving that message to them, or what would be maybe a message you would say to them as well that you could you know, throw out there and that sort of thing, like just to maybe spark some encouragement towards, you know, what the way that we're thinking and our perception. Yeah, I would just say, like, for that counter protest, you know, don't look at the person that's leading it. Like, we don't care for the person at all, being who we are. But think about the kaupapa. For sure, think about the kaupapa and where that's going to get us in 10 years' time. Yeah. How about you, Whitney? Anything?
Yeah, so my thoughts and feelings recently is realising that freedom, for us, everyone to have freedom, we need to agree to disagree. Because you will agree so much with people, but there are always going to be things that you don't agree on, just like in a relationship, right? It works, but we definitely don't agree on everything. And too many people are nitpicking at things and dividing themselves from everyone when we should be united, and as you said earlier, having discussions, not arguments with each other.
Discussions. It's like on that first Parliament protest back in February, March, you know, we came across like Chantal Baker and whatnot, and we had no idea who all these people were, ever. Never heard of them before in our life. And they were all there as individuals with their own personal reasonings, you know. There was no homophobia or racism or whatever the people out there think it's all about. You know, it was just individuals with their own story and their own reasonings to be there, and that's how we should be looking at each other, as just individuals, not as groups or, you know, anything like that.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and I definitely think perspective is power.
And understanding each other's perspective. Like, I understand why people are walking behind Brian Tamaki and Destiny's Church and the Freedom Rights Coalition and stuff like that. And I also understand why the counter-protest was there, you know, and having that understanding with each other, you could quite easily have that discussion to be able to, you know, help come together as a united front.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to listen and hear individuals and each other's experiences, then you're not going to get anywhere. That discussion's just not going to be had.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I found, just coming from Australia, you know, being the last 3 weeks there and just seeing their protests and all that. They have all their groups, but they have been consistent over, I think, almost 18 months of just turning up every Saturday at 12 p.m. in front of their parliament and doing their rounds of the city of about 2.5 hours. And they'll stop trams, traffic, police are in there, and they stop every so often, and they have like little speakers and they speech out, you know, they get like a selective person from each of their groups that say that sort of thing. And there's you know, there's people that are anti-CCP, you know, the Chinese Communist Party, and you have, you know, from all sorts of communities, everything. It's unreal, all different languages and whatnot, and to see that all come together and be consistent every single week in that, you know, in Melbourne, I mean, let alone all the other cities within Australia, it's unreal. And I think that's what it needs to be. It needs to be something that people need to be reminded of, you know, if they're losing hope or they're not believing and losing in faith in the whole thing altogether. And it's not even about turning up to the protest itself. I think for me, it's, you know, just showing that support, that, you know, have that faith that we can make that change. Because if we don't, then, you know, just, I think education as well, like you said, it's teaching people how to research, and the other thing they were doing over there was handing pieces of paper with links and little facts and statements from doctors and actual, you know, like infamous people that have obviously stood up and spoken or exposed about what's going on. And so that's really cool, you know. And I think educating those people with all that sort of stuff is cool. And yeah, it's amazing. Like you said, just listening to those individuals and thinking, oh, actually, that's something different that I haven't come across. Or you know?
It just widens your own perspective, and you know, then, you know, usually we base our opinions off the little knowledge that we know. If we go and hear other people's stories and hear their perspective, it just widens ours so much more, which will give us a way more accurate opinion as such. Yeah. You know, when you've just got something bigger to go off than just your little small mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, what you were saying in terms of, you know, gender, people affiliating themselves with genders, and what is it actually to be gay? And you're saying there's just two different things. Like, one is an actual mental comprehension versus, you know.
Yes, the LGBT community, and talking about the gender issues and sexuality issues, and how gender identity is completely different to sexuality. Being gay, lesbian, bisexual is not an identity issue. It's a sexuality thing, whereas transgender, non-binary, it's more of an identity issue. And I can speak that through my own experience of going through a transition myself and having the struggles of self-worth, my own identity, and knowing who I am as a person. So it's... gender identity is nothing to do. I personally feel, after my journey, gender identity has nothing to do with sexuality and really the LGB part of it. It's, like I said, it's identity. It's more of an internal thing, a mental body dysmorphia thing.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, in my perspective, with my journey, I just put that in there.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, it was really good what we were discussing earlier. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about that before until you said it, how it is all grouped into one thing, but...
they're two different things.
It is completely separate, because whether you are physically male or physically female doesn't determine your sexuality, as in whether you're attracted to a male
Sexual attraction.
or a female.
Yeah, it's LGBT is. I found it odd. Like I kind of find it odd how it's not a separate community because it's so separate to the LGB. The first, part of it. It's an identity issue.
Yeah.
It's completely different.